if any, do you have to help with the enforcement of code violations within the city?
Like code enforcement?
I believe so, yes.
Well, I'm not really up on how big the problem is with code enforcement. I'm very familiar with what I have to do in order to be able to stay within the guidelines of code enforcement, being that I'm the business owner of the sign shop, and we have to have permits every time we have to do anything in the city of Brownwood. So we go out and we get our permits, and we follow the guidelines. I do know that there's a very gray area with some citizens because they just don't know what codes they have to follow. So I would say that one of the first things I would do is make the citizens aware of what the codes are. And I know whenever I go to the city hall and I talk to them about some changes in the ordinances and different things that pertain to me, he says, well, look it up on the webpage. You know, it's right there. You know, you're welcome to look it up anytime you want to. But there's got to be some way where we can make the community more aware of the needs and what has to be done in order to be able to follow the guidelines.
On code violations, I think over the past few years, some of this stems from the fact that at one point we were somewhat a rural community and things were done here a little looser than it has been in the past few years. And I think over the past few years, the code enforcement has become much more substantial. I think we have some good people at City Hall that are looking at the codes and paying attention to them. I know that several of my friends have run into code issues where they've had to go back and do it by the book. And I think that that's one of those things where we continue to press forward and we continue to try to bring everybody up to the level where they're used to dealing with the codes and they're doing those things according to the rules and regulations that we already have in place.
I'm going to tie the code enforcement to what we've been talking about as far as the drug problem and the crime problem. For the past 2 years, I've served on the Building and Standards Commission, and it has been an eye-opening experience to me. If you drive around many parts of Brownwood, you'll see vacant houses. A lot of those are crack houses, and you have a lot of different vagrant and criminal activity going on around there in our neighborhoods. I'm blessed to live where I live over on Good Shepherd in Ward 1, and people say, what trouble do you have over there? It doesn't matter what ward you live in. We're running for city council, all of us, and it matters whether you not live where I do, but in the city we have to crack down on that. Through the code enforcement, one thing we already took into account is they used to meet only a couple times a year and tackle usually about 7 or 8 of the vacant houses in town and enforce those type of codes. We've now stepped it up to quarterly, and starting in May, I'm excited to say it's going to be monthly. And monthly, they're tackling 6 or 7 houses. If I'm fortunate to win your vote and be on the council, I hope to continue to strengthen that, because a house next to my house that's crack infested, that has some criminal activity around it, should be no different. I'm blessed to live where I live, but every house in Brownwood should be able to have the exact same enforcement as I do in my neighborhood. And I think through code enforcement, through the Building and Standards Commission, we've taken those steps, and I think we need to continue to do so to affect our crime rate.
I remember right before I left the Metroplex, there was a story on the news. I can't remember which of the subsidiary city governments it was, but there was a lady who was fined several $1,000s because she had some weeds growing up in the sidewalk of her yard, and she was just irate that she would have to pay this fine for these weeds. Obviously, that's taking it to a ridiculous extreme in that particular case, but code enforcement can be very important in this regard. We talk about drug problems and the deterioration of neighborhoods. If we allow our neighborhoods to deteriorate to a point that they become drug havens, then we're in trouble. And so we have to support our code enforcement folks. We have to support them to keep our neighborhoods looking well. The other thing about it is we all depend upon our code enforcement to make sure that our neighborhood and our property values are protected. Nobody wants to live on the street or next to the guy who doesn't take good care of their property. And so in a sense, the city government through code enforcement can help us all by making sure that they're protecting all of our property values by enforcing the code.
I agree with everything that's been said, and what's important about code enforcement is it ties in with beautification of a city. You know, who wants to move to a city that you have all these buildings or homes that are falling down and making the neighborhoods look bad? So it's important to have these because that's how you keep your city and improve your city and your beautification. And you get rid of the drug problem, the problem for these empty homes, people to hang out and do their illegal activities. So it's something that we need. We need to have common sense, and most time an ordinance comes along as we need it, and we see that something takes place. I mean, like parking cars in your yard and things like this. You know, if you had your neighborhood full of people parking cars in their yard and swinging an engine out of their car after they work on it or something would be somewhat we wouldn't want in our neighborhood. So the ordinance is good, and it's good that we have them, and they do need to be looked at from time to time, and when something new comes along that needs to be addressed, we need to take care of that business.